Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1428B and today's date is November 17th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The U.S. Issues a Travel Warning for this Holiday Season. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, as we know, the United States made Russia register as a foreign agent, and it looks like what the cabal is trying to do right now is they're trying to stop all outside news from getting into the United States. And it looks like they're trying to stop all other countries reporting on what is going on around the world. And this, again, they're going to be using to say that they're fighting fake news. And they're trying to cover up all their lies that they've been spouting out into the corporate media for all these years. And we need to understand that as they do this, they're going to be hitting the alternative media. They're going to be hitting everyone that does not jive with the corporate media. And it looks like they're going after China right now, the Xinhua news agency, and it looks like they might have them register as a foreign agent. And there are many other countries that are going to be included in this. And this does look like it's an attempt to stop all news and make sure that what everyone is listening to is only the corporate media. This is why we can see the whole fake news campaign has been pushed. This is why they've been pushing social media to crack down on those individuals that aren't telling the truth or those organizations that aren't telling the truth. And this is why they have the fact checking that tried to make all different types of excuses of why you shouldn't listen to these other sources, that you should only listen to the corporate media. But if you really look at their track record and you look at the track record of the corporate media, a lot of things that are coming out of there are completely made up. Actually, it's just all propaganda. Most of the articles today, if you look at real news, they're not even sourced anymore. It's just he said, she said, rumors, and there's no source behind it. Even what the United States is out there saying when they start talking about like what is happening out in Syria, what is happening out in North Korea, it's just their opinion. It's just their propaganda of saying, oh, look at this and you must believe that whatever I'm showing you here, that person did it. But they're not showing any link or any type of proof that can back that up. And this is where they're getting into the problem. And other countries are out there saying, please provide this proof because we have different information. And this other information is saying that you're lying. I mean, we see this all over the place. I mean, think about this. They came out and said Trump was colluding with Russia. And they told us they have all this evidence. They have the Trump dossier. They have Trump Jr. meeting. They have all this stuff. And it all turned out to be fake, phony, and false. There was no shred of proof that they could back any of this up. Actually, Congress was looking into it. They couldn't find anything. There was nothing there. So this is how we know that the corporate media has been pushing and still is pushing propaganda. But they make it sound so good because what they do is they keep repeating it. Remember, these news organizations, they're owned by 5 companies. So if they keep repeating it and another station repeats it and another station repeats it, people think in their minds, well, that must be the truth then. But you never really heard the truth because you never heard the sources, the facts that back up what they're saying. We see out in Zimbabwe, there are major problems. We talked about a coup, how military was on the ground. And we can see right now that Mugabe and the government is still intact. And it looks like they're pushing for impeachment right now. And it looks like the coup actually didn't work. And they're still there. So it looks like there's something going on in this country, and most likely it's backed by the cabal where they're pushing this agenda. We see that the cabal, well, they are getting really, really desperate at this point. They're saying that Russia's military, they are threatening and preparing to invade Europe. Their military is encroaching upon Europe. Now, what is their proof? Their proof is that Russia they are having military drills within its own borders. When did military drills within your borders, when did this mean that you're encroaching upon another country? It makes no sense. So if the United States had a military drill, that means we're encroaching upon Mexico? Canada? I mean, think about this in another way. The United States and NATO brought all their forces, military equipment, assets up to the border of Russia. And they have drills right on the border of Russia. I mean, that looks a little bit more like they're encroaching upon Russia than the other way around. Russia is in their country having military drills. But you could see at this point, they're getting so worried, they're trying to make anything up they possibly can. We see Russia vetoed a draft that was created by the U.S. where they wanted to extend the UN GIM mandate. And the GIM mandate expires on November 17th. And remember, this is used to basically do the investigation in Syria on their chemical weapons. And we could see that Russia said, no, absolutely not. We're not allowing this. And the reason for it is because, first of all, there was no investigation in Syria. There was no technical investigation at all. They didn't take any of the evidence from Russia where they showed that, yeah, this didn't happen. And they were only getting information from the white helmets and from the militants, and they were using that to create their investigative reporting. And they were using this to say that, yes, Assad has been using chemical weapons, which is absolutely ridiculous. Who has an investigation where you don't actually investigate? The United States. Because the United States is all for this. They want this. Because it's all propaganda once again. This is how they work. And when Russia stepped in and said, and China actually stepped in and said, hey, listen, maybe we should send teams to Syria to investigate what is going on. The United States said, no, absolutely not. I should say the cabal. They didn't want that to happen because this would have proven that it didn't happen. It was a false flag. And there were a lot of experts, and we went over this many, many times, showing that this whole chemical attack really didn't happen. It was completely staged. We see right now that the Department of State is alerting all U.S. citizens of terrorist attacks throughout Europe, particularly during this holiday season. And U.S. citizens should exercise caution at holiday festivals and events. And this travel alert expires January 31st, 2018. Now, we can see that they're saying, listen, in France, in Sweden, United Kingdom, Spain, Finland, and many other countries, we might see something happen. Germany is another country. We might see something happen in these countries. And they started to cite some examples. Like last year, there was a mass casualty attack which occurred in the Christmas market in Berlin. And there was a nightclub in Istanbul in Turkey on New Year's Eve where there was something that happened. Now, once again, we've been talking about this event from and by the cabal. We know most likely they're planning something. We know that they need some type of an event and they're running out of time. Think about what's happening here. And we discussed this before. Syria and Russia are asking the United States to leave. The United States is making excuses. I should really say the cabal, the factions, are making excuses of why they need to stay in there. They're there illegally. The UN never gave them permission. Even though they're trying to convince us that the UN did give them permission, no, the UN does not have that authority. So they're trying to figure out a way to stay. How did the cabal get into these countries in the first place? They staged events. They convinced people, the American people and the rest of the world, that they needed to go into these countries because of weapons of mass destruction, because they might have chemical weapons, because there's a grassroots uprising and now there are terrorists. And they keep using these things to convince us that they need to stay there. And they stage events. Well, here are pictures of people that were part of a chemical attack. We're not going to show you actually who did it. We're just going to show you pictures of what happened, which is kind of meaningless because unless you know and who it's linked to, it's meaningless on its own. So we know from the past, like 9/11, these mass shootings, the Islamic State in all these different countries, these where they stage these blowing up of certain areas. We know that they're going to stage something to convince the American people, to convince the world, to convince the people in the UN why they need to stay in Syria, in Iraq, and all the other countries. So most likely they're going to stage some type of an event, maybe using the Islamic State, where they show they are gaining strength, where they are still dangerous, and they're going to have to try to manipulate it in such a way, or maybe they'll come up with a new terrorist group where it's an offshoot of the Islamic State, because now there's a vacuum within the country, and now they're terrorizing Europe, and this is why they need to stay in Syria. They're going to come up with some type of reason of why they need to stay in these countries, because we discussed this, and it's been a long time now, how these countries eventually were going to take back ownership, where the people were going to control and manage and run their countries. And eventually what they were going to do is they were going to say, hey, you know something? We don't need the central bank here. We don't need to sell our natural resources using the dollar. We can use other currencies. We can use maybe gold or silver or anything else. Cryptocurrencies. It makes no difference. And once they do this, the system falls apart. And it falls apart very, very quickly. Because the system was built on the petrodollar. And this is why we went into all these countries. Now, we see that this is ending. And it's all going to come down. And we know the cabal, they're using whatever force, whatever event they need to cover it up and make it look like we need to go back into these places. And maybe even, hopefully, this is what they really want, is to start a war, to cover up everything. I think at this point in time, it's not even about staying there. It's about staying and starting a war and trying to get China and Russia involved in this new war. And this is why we see Saudi Arabia and Israel going after Iran. This is why we see North Korea. This is why we see all this happening, because they are running out of time. The system is breaking down rapidly. I mean, think about what is happening in this country and how people are so not in tune with what is really happening in this economy. They're going about their everyday lives. They think everything is fine, especially those individuals that have jobs. Now think about 2007, 2008, where people were going about their everyday work. They were going to work. They were coming home. They were getting their paycheck. Had no clue that there was any problems in the economy. The only time you know something's wrong is when you get laid off and you try to get another job and there's no other job out there. The only time you know there's a problem is when you lose your job and you're out of work for a very long time. You start to realize something's wrong. The only time you know something's wrong is if you own a business and the business is not making money anymore. And you can't explain why. Why did sales just dry up? I mean, think about all these retail stores. They're just disappearing. One after another. They're going bankrupt. They're closing down. And this is not because of online sales. They all have an online presence. They all make it seem like everyone was late to the game. Really, these major retailers, they're late to the game. No, they actually had online presence, and they actually had a little bit of a benefit where you can order online, go to the store, and get it that day. They made it really easy, and you didn't have to pay shipping. Some stores are still doing that. But we see right now, the system is breaking apart. The foundation of the economy is gone. What's left is the fakeness up above. And when the foundation erodes, and you know this with a home or a building, and it starts to erode and deteriorate and crumble apart, eventually what happens is everything on top comes crashing down. Well, everyone looks on top. That's all the manipulation. They're not looking underneath. We've been looking underneath. We've been seeing everything. I mean, think about 2007, 2008. Those individuals that knew what the subprime securities, what was happening with them, they were looking underneath. They were looking at the foundation of them. And they realized the whole thing is crumbling apart. That means that AAA rating is going to come crashing down. The subprime securities were going to implode. This is what's happening right now with the economy. This is what we've been looking at. We've been looking at the foundation. And the foundation is about to give way. And everything is going to come crashing down. This is why you need to be ready and prepared for what is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.